everyone's trying to figure out how to use these tools inside a walled garden, right? Because as soon as I put any of my own data out there, there's a lot that the adversaries can infer. There's a lot they can figure out about your business processes, about your security posture, about the kinds of threats you're concerned with, about how well you handle insider exposure and insider risk. Yeah. And that's a huge security risk for any organization.
Vivienne Suen of TD, the distinguished architect for enterprise protection. And there are few people that deserve a title like that. I know there's a double meaning, but that deserve that title more. It's great to see you again. Obviously we've worked together in the past as partners. And you are not only an extremely well-liked person in this industry, you are a very respected person in this industry, but you come with a very unique perspective, because when you and I worked together, you were at IBM and IBM Security, and now you are on the client side with TD. So first and foremost, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. I'm off for spring break right now, so it's a lot of sleeping in, walks with the dog, activities and little adventures in the city with my son. So
it's a good thing that cyber criminals also go on vacation. That's
yeah, totally. Like they absolutely.
So nice of them. So nice of them to respect that.
So thoughtful. Yeah, no. I have an excellent team backing me up, for sure. And you and I, we've talked about this before, that if you work in cybersecurity, you kind of have to accept that you will never be end of job on anything, right? Because the threat landscape's always changing, everything's changing, and as the good guys, we have to get it right 24/7. The bad guys only have to get it right once, and we see that time and again and again and again. When we were preparing for this, you said, what keeps you up at night? And oh my gosh, so many things.
All right, so why don't we just go straight into that? Because I want to, get your thoughts on this explosion of AI tools that people want to adopt. People are also starting to use or demanding that tools that have nothing to do with creating stuff, generative AI, whatever. But people are demanding now, it seems, that the tools in case of cybersecurity that protect us, that analyzes data, that give us insight, come not just fueled with machine learning and AI. They were doing that forever, but with more, that they can think for us or help us take action and so on. And that makes a ton of sense when new technologies become more popular. And there's so many use cases you can easily think about, but it's also a Pandora's box that we open, that so many things to keep us up at night. So let's jump in there straight away. What does concern you now that you are using these tools not to help other companies succeed, but that you are very much on the front line and it's your team that has to be 24/7 right now?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting because, to your point, we've been using machine learning and AI in cybersecurity for a long time.
Right.
Machine learning in technology has been available for a long time. We've been using it, and it's been typically what we call narrow AI. Things like doing faster threat detection and correlation of events in near real time, right? That's been available in cybersecurity for years. Mm-hmm. What's new in the last 2 years, I would say, is a couple of things. One is absolutely generative AI and the prevalence of large language models. But there's also been this shift on the consumer side, where I think every organization is dealing with this, with the understanding that, okay, all of my customers are expecting some kind of AI-enabled experience.
Exactly.
Yes, which means as any kind of service provider or product company, not only do you have to deliver that, but you have to secure it.
Yeah.
And then we get in this feedback loop of, can we use AI to secure the AI? And do we even understand how we're using the AI? And I think this is where everything becomes a very shaky house of cards for me. Right. It's a weird time for me personally, because I've always been a technology optimist. And right now, I'm much more scared of the AI capabilities out there than I ever have been. And a lot of this is around some of the issues with generative AI. The fact that it's so easy to use, it's removed this barrier to entry to a very powerful technology that we don't fully understand and don't have proper visibility and traceability into. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute because that's a huge concern I have with generative AI in particular. There's such a huge attribution problem with these tools. And most of the cases I've seen of generative AI being used effectively, quite frankly, helps the bad guys more than it helps the good guys. Mm-hmm. You can use these tools to very quickly write different variants of malware, right?
Yeah.
You can use these tools to very quickly generate very credible social profiles for social engineering, which remains one of the most constant attack vectors because people are always going to be people. People are always going to want that connection, that deal, that whatever, right? You can't stop that. So those are very easy uses of AI for the adversary that don't require a lot of technical knowledge or sophistication. And that concerns me because when you use the tools that way, you're also making those attack vectors harder to detect. And the other thing that I see is we've always relied in cybersecurity on these AI tools to help us do better detection and better threat identification. And so how do we leverage generative AI to do that? Well, you're really looking at machine-powered decision-making. And this is where I get really nervous about it, because the thing with machine learning is that it analyzes scenarios and makes decisions and comes up with likely outcomes, right? It's not a truth-telling device. It doesn't actually predict the future, but it comes up with possible outcomes at a breadth, depth, and scale that humans can't, right? So in the time that it takes a human data scientist or data analytics expert to come up with the different variables to test out in your model, the AI's already done it and then some, right? In a matter of minutes or seconds. And what I worry about is that we start to lose track of why those decisions are made. Interestingly enough, just as AI has been around for a long time, there have been different bodies around the world, different regulatory bodies, legislative bodies, technical expert communities who've been trying to address that question of what is a trustworthy AI for decades. And you don't have to look very far, right? There's EU papers on trustworthy AI. There's a NIST framework for responsible AI. If you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel, you actually don't have to. There's a lot of content out there that any organization who wants to develop a responsible AI framework can draw upon. And that's exactly what we're doing where I work, is we're looking at some of the existing frameworks and standards out there, figuring out how do we incorporate this into our overall governance framework. And a big part of responsible AI is you have to ensure that it does no harm. And this is where I get really scared, because I don't think we have the ability to do that. I think that if you're not very, very careful about how you use these tools, you will end up causing some kind of financial, material, physical, emotional, social harm. You don't have to go very far to find stories of, even where AI isn't involved. There's the racist soap dispensers that don't detect people with darker skin tones, right? That's not even a system. That's just something that's poorly designed. And it's nobody knew that was a problem until it was out there not detecting people's hands to give them soap. And it's my concern is that we start using these tools for decision making, and we don't know what harm we're causing until it's too late to put the genie back in the bottle. So that's why a lot of organizations, when they start looking at large language models, you have to look very carefully at whose services you're using. Are they a reputable vendor? Or am I using Uncle Sketchy's, large language model that was trained on fan fiction and Reddit? Because that may not be the most responsible course, right? For your decision making. I don't know, depending on what kind of business maybe it is, I'm not going to judge. But you have to be careful about the provenance of these tools. You have to ask questions about your own intellectual property and data privacy. And this is where, at the enterprise level, I think any anyone at the enterprise level is not going to use ChatGPT. Very famously, there was an instance over a year ago now, where at one point ChatGPT started spitting out Amazon recommendations, which, hilarious, also means that somebody uploaded code from Amazon into it at some point, right? Some part of the Amazon recommendation engine became part of the ChatGPT corpus. That's a huge problem for intellectual property, for data privacy. It's a huge problem. I wouldn't be surprised if someone got fired for that, right? The other thing you have to think about is what is acceptable use. When I was speaking at the CISO forum about a month ago now, there was a person on the panel that I was moderating from a cybersecurity services provider. And he said it's right there as a condition of their employment, the acceptable use. And it's like, if you use ChatGPT or any of these AI tools that are open, if you put any of our intellectual property on there, that is cause for dismissal. So we've got to be really clear on acceptable use. Which tools are we using under which circumstances? And not surprisingly, on the enterprise side, I think everyone's trying to figure out how to use these tools inside a walled garden, right? Because as soon as I put any of my own data out there, there's a lot that the adversaries can infer. There's a lot they can figure out about your business processes, about your security posture, about the kinds of threats you're concerned with, about how well you handle insider exposure and insider risk. And that's a huge security risk for any organization.
So a question that I want to then ask you, because you make a very, very good point, and what we cannot forget here when people are watching this is that, yes, this started as a technology risk conversation, but the human element is really, really important in the sense that, forever, there's been the idea of shadow IT at technologies, where people are using applications, technology that are not sanctioned by an organization. This is not something new. This is happening all the time. I've been part of examinations at organizations where you ask the IT director or a CIO, like, hey, how many apps do you use? And on average, people will say like, 25 to 50 apps. And then we find out in the average mid-sized Canadian organization, there's 1,500 that are, roaming the halls and corridors of this company's infrastructure. What's your take on a best practice that organizations can do to make sure that we combat that? Because here's a problem. You say very, very rightfully so, you need to adopt engines. If there is a clear or a needed use case for an AI technology, generative specifically, that you have to go with reputable organizations. But we always see the cutting edge innovation coming usually from newer organizations, and at the same time, I know and without naming any names or any companies, but I've seen larger organizations go like, or it feels at least that they go like, well, we have to kind of jump on this AI bandwagon because everybody's asking for AI, so we better start putting in our marketing materials and our sales scenarios that our technology has some sort of AI in it, and they're not there yet. So you have this mixed bag of, we've got reputable cybersecurity vendors that don't really have that AI story yet, and we've got untested, interesting technologies that people want to use. That's a tough situation to be in. Like, what would you say that people looking at this, and people, especially people that are in charge of technology or team leaders and what have you, like, how do you ensure that people get that if it's already so hard to make people go through security awareness training?
So, unpopular opinion. First and foremost, like as you said, it has to be outcome focused.
Right.
You've got to be very clear about what is the use case, what is the outcome I'm striving for, how am I going to measure success, right? And then the very next question you have to ask is, do I really need AI for this?
Exactly.
Yeah, like 'cause you'd be surprised how many people skip over either question number one or question number two. You have to ask those questions. You have to have, and it doesn't have to be 100 pages long. In fact, it's probably a good idea if it's shorter than that. You have to have some kind of framework or standard or something about responsible, trustworthy AI for your organization,
Yeah.
right? And it's going to look different for everybody, but you've got to understand like what those guardrails are. And I strongly believe, and you'll find this in all of the standards documentation and anything you might want to refer to out there. Everyone's very, very clear about using this in a way that doesn't create harm. You cannot cause harm, okay, to your customers, your employees, your partners, the economy, the environment, right? Everything. So you have to ask those questions, like, what's the outcome? Do I really need AI? And if the answer to that is yes, and you're here, okay, think about what is the data I'm putting in? How confidential is that? Because if it's confidential and you don't want it getting out, then that immediately narrows the field of tools and some appliers that you can actually look at. And you should ask any vendor of any AI tools, and trust your experts too. Trust your data scientists. Trust your technology experts within your organization, because there, as you said, Jasper, there's a lot of vendors out there who will say that, oh, we've got an AI flavor, and maybe they do, and maybe they don't.
Tastes like AI.
yeah, exactly. I get a whiff of AI off this. I think this is good. Somebody waved a card that said AI around it, and there you go. So be skeptical, ask the hard questions, listen to your experts, and don't just believe whatever the vendor tells you. Ask them if they'll let you do model validation, right? Ask them how much of that they'll open up. Because some vendors are very transparent and others are not, for different reasons. But I mean, if you look at, there are some vendors out there who will say, oh yeah, here's the 7 base machine learning models that we use, and here's how you can tune them, and the variables that you can, fiddle around with, and the ones that you can't, and here's why. And to me, that's a really, really excellent level of transparency, right? That's someone who's not afraid to show you how the sausage is made. And that's one of the things that we have to be very aware of is, if I use these tools to make decisions, where's the accountability, right? How can I go back to why this decision was made in the event that I did have a harmful outcome? And am I prepared to take accountability for that? A lot of people may have seen recently Air Canada got in a lot of trouble because their chatbot, their generative AI chatbot, gave someone bad advice. And he took them to court. And the Air Canada lawyers actually tried to say, oh, well, we're not responsible for what the AI chatbot says. It's its own thing. And nice try, lawyers, but no, you are absolutely responsible for that.
Yeah. Now, so we've been talking for about 10 minutes now, and I've not heard a single reference to Star Wars. So I wonder, like, who are you and what have you done with the real Vivienne? All kidding.
Avatar. We've been binging Avatar all week because the new Avatar on Netflix is the bomb.
There we go. Awesome. All right. So besides Netflix shows and sci-fi, I mean, there's a lot of things that we clearly have to be very, very vigilant and critical about. But at the very start of this conversation, you said, like, well, there's also exciting stuff happening, without a doubt. And there are elements and use cases where AI is helping people in the cybersecurity trenches. So your take on what is exciting, apart from keeping you up at night?
Yeah, one thing that's really exciting is, I think it was almost 2 years ago now, a couple of AI researchers in France came up with a way of putting together machine learning algorithms to do faster, more reliable detection of DDoS attacks. And like not even a year later, products based on that hit the market. And that's the kind of innovation that I love, right? It's outcome focused, it's backed by the science. It tells you exactly which droids you're looking for. There's your Star Wars reference, Jasper. and that excites me. I was talking to another organization where they use a self-contained generative AI large language model. So it's not open to the internet, it's completely private. but they've trained it on their incident response playbooks.
Okay.
So they use it to help their cyber incident responders make those decisions quicker, do those assessments with the assistance of a generative AI model. So that excited me because, again, they've thought very hard about the guardrails and the use case. And I like that in particular because, cyber incidents are always evolving. No one incident looks like the one before it. So to me, that's a really good use of the non-deterministic nature of generative AI. So those are a couple innovations in this area that I am excited to see. But overall, I do think that AI and cybersecurity is having a hot girl summer, and probably hotter than it deserves to be. Got it?
I got it.